Hi, my name is Nyad, also known as Dea. I'm here with my co-host, Merryana Salem, also known as Mary. We are two writers who love movies, TV, and books, especially when they're gay. And welcome to Gay V Club, where we look at these texts and how we relate to them as gay people of colour.
Hello!
Hello! It's lovely to be back. Thanks for listening. If you like us, please consider leaving a nice review wherever you listen to podcasts. On Spotify, they're letting us ask questions on specific episodes now. So yeah, if you're listening on Spotify and want to leave a response, that would be really nice. We love reading them. We're on Twitter and Instagram at gayv_club. And we've also got a Patreon, which is patreon.com/gayvclub, where we release bonus episodes every month or so. We use those funds mostly to support LGBT cinema, like so that we can go to the movies and see stuff. So, yeah. Speaking of LGBT cinema.
This is our 2023 movie roundup of stuff we saw in 2023 that was released in 2023. It is not an exhaustive list because we're very lucky to live in a time where there's actually quite a lot of LGBT cinema. But this is the stuff we saw and really enjoyed and had thoughts about.
Or had strong feelings about, at least. I also just want to say that people that do their yearly media wrap-ups and have them out by like December 31st, I think they are cowards.
Also, they must live in countries with great distribution, which we don't.
Yeah, which we don't. In Australia, it's real bad. So like, I'm glad that we waited. I'm sorry that we took this long, but I am glad that we waited because we were able to watch more stuff so that we can talk about. But yeah, speaking of poor distribution, our first film is actually a film from 2022. That wasn't released in Australia until 2023, despite being an Australian film. It was a really lovely film, Of an Age, directed by Goran Stilevsky.
It's set in the 90s, I believe.
Yeah.
Or the majority of it is set in the 90s. It's about a guy doing his HSC, which for our international listeners, it's like the big exam you do at the end of school.
To get into university in our state.
It determines your score to get into university. It's short for higher school certificate. And he's in his sort of final weeks of doing his HSC.
I think he's basically done his HSC.
He's got his drama performance to go, which is always done like a little bit later than the exams. Sorry, you guys don't really need to know that, but it's just good context if you do watch this movie. His partner, who he's doing his dance performance with for his HSC, she is a flakes. She flakes.
Oh my god, I'd kill this bitch.
I would kill this person.
She would bring his HR down from not showing up.
I experienced something very similar to this, where I did my music performance exam, and the person who was accompanying me on guitar, like, because I was a singer, they didn't show up on the day of the exam. Thankfully, my teacher could fill in for the guy who was meant to accompany me, but I understood, like, I felt this aspect of the movie, I felt it viscerally. I have been in this situation. It is terrible, okay? Yes, so he's a Macedonian Australian, and a lot of the movie is like a conversation between the main character and the older brother of his friend as they drive around looking for his friend. And a lot of the movie is kind of set around this day and, like, the conversation between them and how you're sort of watching the main character realize that they're gay. And
I wouldn't say it's a realization.
Well,
it's more like it's a turning point. Like, it's set on one day, and it's kind of that turning point of him deciding whether or not to actually take that step and, you know, live his life as a gay person, which I think when you're young, or even like at any age really, like you do have this turning point where you decide these things. And I think the movie really captures that moment very beautifully for this character.
There's lots of reasons that I personally love this movie. I love movies that are conversations.
Just two people talking.
And I also like how specifically this movie is like a representation of a gay WOG experience. And before I fully launch into this, I'll just say, in Australia, the word wog is used as a slur to describe people from like the Mediterranean, basically.
But also parts of Eastern Europe.
And even like North Africa. It is like a kind of catch-all slur for these honestly very different cultures. But it's really hard to describe, like, that Australia is such a racist place that even other white people are called this particular slur. I understand that it has its origins as a British slur for black people specifically, but that should give you an idea of just how, like, racist white Australians are, that this word is used to describe people who are literally European. Like, who are literally European. I shouldn't laugh, but it is true. And so what you will often hear, like, if you are talking to Australians who are of, like, Eastern European or even, like, Western European and Mediterranean, Arab, or even North African descent, is like, you'll hear us talk about ourselves as wogs, or you might even hear people refer to us as wogs. It is a slur that a lot of people in the community, not really me, I'm like half and half about it, depends on my mood, but, you know, we often use it to describe that specific experience of being othered in Australia as wogs. And this movie, it's very much about the very specific experience of being a kid in a wog immigrant family, and also like a gay wog experience, because the main character is Macedonian Australian. He lives in a very, like, Maso household. I had friends who were Macedonian at school. Like, so much of this movie I was like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that house smells like. In a nice way. I don't mean that in a bad way. And so I really want to emphasize to people just how delightfully specific that is in this movie. And, you know, the main character talks about, like, when he's older, how he and his mum have become kind of cut off from the rest of his family because he's gay. And that's unfortunately, like, very common in a lot of immigrant families everywhere, not just WOG immigrant families, but that's because of the way that WOGs are othered and because of the sort of closeness of that community. Queer people in the WOG community, like, are often experience this ostracization because of how othered we are, just by virtue of being from not Australia, from not England, basically. And I really love that about this film. Weirdly, there's not a lot of movies that take this experience seriously. There is a lot of films in Australia that kind of make fun of this community, and like, there's a whole subgenre of Australian media that is, like, making fun of WOG culture, and it's usually made by WOGs, in fairness. You know, you have, like, media like WOGs Out of Work and
WOG Boys.
And for me, like, a thing that I really loved about this movie was it's not poking fun at WOG culture. It's actually taking the intergenerational sort of immigrant experience of being in this community and in a family like this very seriously and, you know, really nicely. And I really, watching this movie made me realize, like, how weirdly rare that is, even though there is a lot of media about WOGs, quote unquote, out there, especially in Australia. Not a lot of it is dealt with sincerely in the way that this movie deals with it. And I think that comes from, you know, like a lot of marginalized people, the only way you can defend yourself is by laughing at yourself first before you're laughed at. And I really deeply love this movie, like, on that level. I think it's honestly one of the few movies that is really sincere about that. And I really think that's beautiful. And we should have more movies that do this, honestly. It's really sad that there isn't.
Goran Stolevsky has a new movie out this year called Housekeeping for Beginners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be on him to do this.
Yeah.
He's doing the work. But yeah, I just love this movie from that angle. It's hard to describe. Like, I'm not Macedonian. I can't speak to the specific Macedonian experience, but being a WOG in Australia is such, like, an amalgamous identity that you do feel connected when you see other WOG media, like, even if it's not really like a culture that you are a part of. So
it's like underneath the slur, like, the racist Australians have actually, like, united all these communities.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah.
Although, you know, just a separate thing I would love to talk about is how actually within the WOG community, like, there is a lot of racism.
Yeah.
Because the European WOGs, like, really do think they're above, like, the others, and it's, but I won't talk about that.
Yeah.
Please watch this movie. It is so delightful. It is so wonderful. The performances are amazing. The dialogue is incredible.
Another thing that made this movie beautiful to me was across from the main character, there is Tom Green, who played Sammy Lieberman in Dance Academy. And, you know, given the infamous trauma, given the infamy of what happened to Sammy on Dance Academy and how that traumatized a lot of gay people my age who watched the show at the time, it felt very healing to see Tom Green play, you know, an alive adult guy who was gay and happy with himself. And, you know, also he was driving around and he was playing the Happy Together soundtrack in his cassette player, and it was you know, it was hitting me from all different angles, and I really appreciate it for that as well.
And, you know, just for the record, for the other Dance Academy fans out there, we're recording this during the week that's the anniversary of Sammy's death, apparently. And I know this because ABC loves to post about it and loves to remind everybody.
Sorry, tangent, but like what they do, they go on TikTok and they're like, hey guys, are you guys still sad about Sammy dying? Yeah, me too. Anyways, I've got this new show out, and listen, it's nice when the cast do it, but when the ABC milks it, I'm like, listen, like, it was homophobic of you to do this. It was homophobic of you to kill, like, the only one of the first bi characters that, you know, people our age would have seen on screen in an Australian kids show. Like, it was that was not a good move. Apologize. Stop milking it and apologize.
Yeah.
That's sorry. That's
they can never live it down though. I think that's why they keep posting about it, because they'll never live it down. But anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Moving on. Next up, we've got Wildhood by Breton Hanam, which is a Canadian film. It's a really lovely movie about a gay native man running away from his abusive dad with his little brother because he's trying to find his mom, and he's also meets another native man along the way, and they fall in love.
They fall in love
on the road trip.
Breton Hanam is a Two-Spirit native person from the Mi'kmaq tribe, and this movie is so lovely. I'm Indigenous, but I'm not obviously a First Nations person from Turtle Island, but I just really appreciate gay Indigenous movies because there really isn't a lot of them, even though, like, what we would call, like, queer genders and sexualities have often been part of native cultures for, you know, hundreds and thousands of years. So I just really love seeing films like this. They fill me with a very specific joy. I also love this movie in particular because I remember when we saw this at a queer screening, and the host of the screening was like, I'm a lesbian, but the tenderness of the sex scene, like, really got me. And everyone just went, like,
yeah.
Like everyone like agreed. It was great. It was beautiful.
Like, aesthetically, it looks a lot like The Place Beyond the Pines meets My Own Private Idaho. And there's a very fun, unexpected Children of Men homage as well. Yeah. And yeah,
my favorite thing that any movie
gorgeous
can do.
film. Gorgeous film.
Yeah.
Moving on. Oh, we have Knock at the Cabin, which, you know, I already hated M. Night Shyamalan's work, so it was not a surprise that I hated this movie. It's an adaptation of Cabin at the End of the World, written by Paul Tremblay, and it's about a gay couple played by Jonathan Groff and Ben Aldridge, and they take their young adopted daughter on holiday to an isolated cabin in the woods because that's fun for some people. And then they're visited by a group of strangers who inform them that the world is ending. And then many hate crimes ensue following that. And I hated it. It's so bad. Like, everything about it doesn't make sense. Even, like, when you compare the book to the movie, it just doesn't make sense why you would make certain choices unless you were just being homophobic. I would recommend, actually, the film Leave the World Behind by Sam Esmail. It's not gay at all, but it follows, like, a very similar concept of, like, coping with the end of the world.
Without being an asshole.
Without being shitty. Next up, we have Nimona, which is based on the graphic novel by N.D. Stevenson.
It is a movie aimed at kids. I genuinely think that Gen Alpha will probably cite this movie as their, like, little gay movie they watched growing up, the way that I and many others cite, like, Treasure Planet and I don't know if it's I and many others, but, like, I definitely do.
I thought you were going to say, like, maybe Bend It Like Beckham or something, but yeah, go ahead.
No, Treasure Planet all day, every day.
Yeah, it's about this shape-shifting quote-unquote monster who decides to assist a knight who has been framed. For a crime. Yeah, for a very, very bad crime.
It is created by trans author N.D. Stevenson of ex-Tumblr fame. I used to follow on Tumblr back in the day. It's hard to describe, like, his artwork was so huge. He would make all these fun little comics and little artworks of just everyday things, and people just ate it up, including me. His art style was just so cute and fun. I actually remember him posting drafts of these story ideas. Like, I remember there was a post that was like sort of prototype of the two main characters in Nimona being like, oh, I have this idea of a monster who's best friends with a knight or something like that. And I remember that post, and I remember it because I reblogged it to my writing blog that I've kept being like, oh, story inspiration. Because it's a cool idea, and it's just I don't know, it's just really fun. Like 10 years later, something like 10 years later, like, you know, here's Nimona, the movie Nimona, that sort of came from that idea, and it's just really cool. You know, I love seeing people from Tumblr, like, be successful.
Yeah.
You know, it's just so fun. I feel like it's part of the reason why I love Halsey so much. It's like, yeah. You know, like this is why I don't think we should ever be, like, that ashamed to come from Tumblr, because people from Tumblr have created some of the coolest stuff. Yeah. And people don't know where they came from. Billie Eilish wrote that song, You Should See Me in a Crown. It was inspired by Shuriati post on Tumblr. Like, why are we ashamed from being from Tumblr? I don't know. But yeah, no, I just think that's very cool to see N.D. Stevenson living his dream, living the dream.
Yeah.
It's very much like a fantastical trans allegory movie. I really love when Nimona keeps turning into a shark, when the knight character asks, like, what Nimona is. And at one point she just turns into a shark, and I'm like, yeah, shark gender, so true. Very sweet movie for kids.
And also it finally got me to read the graphic novel after all this time. It's been sitting on my shelf for, like, literally a decade or so.
Wow.
The movie has definitely been tweaked more for children than the graphic novel was, but it's also, like, along with the stronger trans narrative, there's also Ballister and Golden Lion are, like, explicitly gay in the movie instead of subtextually, you know, homoerotic enemies. Which is very nice, though I feel like they should have kept the rivalry antics, as those are always fun to me. So that's Nimona. Next up we have Scream 6, which who cares? Who the fuck cares? And then
Melissa Barrera, we love you.
Anyways, there's the film Somebody I Used to Know, directed by your guy, Dave Franco, Mary?
My guy!
Yeah. It's basically like My Best Friend's Wedding, but a little bit bisexual in the way that
a little
Kiersey
bit
Clemens,
bisexual as a treat.
Yeah. Kiersey Clemens, who is the bride, she plays a bisexual character who's been disowned by her parents, and she's now marrying a man. The lead is Alison Brie, and she's coming to the wedding to get him back. I like that this is a movie that took the time to acknowledge the way heteronormativity can still harm by women, by people, even if they enter into, you know, quote unquote straight marriages. And also Kiersey Clemens is just really hot as well.
She's beautiful.
So that was nice. I mainly just watched it because I saw that Danny Putty was also in it, and so seeing Alison Brie and him together was beautiful. Next up, we have Polite Society, directed by Nida Manzoor of We Are Lady Parts fame.
Which season 2 is coming.
Season 2 is coming.
May.
Yes. Oh,
yay!
I'm so excited. It's been so long. Oh, it's been 3 years.
It's been a long time.
It's been 3 years. And I think Polite Society is going to be this generation's Bend It Like Beckham.
Yeah.
This movie, it looks like the inside of my brain. It's about this young South Asian girl in England who wants to be a stunt woman, and her older sister who's kind of like a loser artist, who's just really hot, played by Ritu Aya. Her older sister,
Dream woman.
Her older sister has become engaged to this really creepy guy who has a really creepy mom, and she's pretty sure that these people are evil, but she doesn't know. She needs to prove it, you know?
She needs to prove it.
So yeah, it's not technically a gay movie, but it is really fun in the way that Rhea is she's just a baby dyke, you know? It's so like the way that she talks about men and marriage in this movie, like even as a teenager, and like the prospects of that, it's exactly what I used to say. I was like, this girl is gay, you know, she's gonna find out soon.
The scene where they're using like hair removal, like waxing her legs as torture, like that's a very, like, I'm not Pakistani, but I am brown, and that's just a very real that's a very real scene for me, and you know, I felt very seen by it, weirdly.
Yeah.
I love the soundtrack of this movie. I love the costuming. I love Rhea and her two besties.
I really liked watching it because my little brother is an MMA fighter and I'm a sad artist. So it was kind of like when I was watching it with him, I'm like, wow, this is literally us. It's a good movie about siblings.
Nothing filled me with love for movies like this movie did. I have no notes, really.
Yeah, go watch it. Yeah.
Good movie.
Good movie.
Oh!
You know, now moving on to something not so good. Not good at all, actually.
I love ranting about this movie.
Yeah. Next up, we have Red, White, and Royal Blue, which Mary watched because they took one for the team.
The premise of this movie is that there is a prince, like some kind of member of the royal family.
Of England?
Yeah, of England. And he falls in love, enemies to lovers style, with the president of the United States' son. And Uma Thurman is the president. I'm sorry, this movie is so funny.
Can you believe this shit?
Uma Thurman is the president.
How do you know?
And she has like a brown son, and like he's the main character of the movie, and he falls in love with this prince.
Oh, the president's son is the main character.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it was Nicholas Galazzi in the way that people talk about it. But I guess, yeah, of course people would make it sound like the white guy is the main character.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
So I think his name is Alex from what I remember. And he's bisexual. And he kind of like, not discovers, he kind of knows he's bisexual, but like, you know, falling in love with this prince guy played by what's his name again?
Nicholas Galazzi, he was at the scene of many crimes last year. Let me tell ya.
No, I need to talk about. Okay, so there's this scene in this movie that, like, honestly, if I could just clip this scene and hang it on my wall, like, I would. It's so important to me. He comes out to his mum, who, need I remind you, is A, the president of the United States, and B, played by Uma Thurman, and he comes out as bi to his mum, and she's just like, well, you know, the B in LGBT isn't a silent letter. And okay, I know everyone thought that this scene was a little bit cringe, and especially with how she's just she's like, right, okay, we need to get you on prep. She's like, she's really supportive. But for me, as a bisexual, and to hear Uma Thurman say, well, the B in LGBT is not a silent letter, that was that means a lot to me, considering. Considering a very
I think bisexual representation has gone too far, actually.
You always think that. A very formative moment for me was when I was in year 11, we watched Gattaca at school. And, you know, I'm bisexual, as many people know. That's
Really?
why the B isn't silent, by the way. And you know, I knew this about myself but didn't really know how to articulate it. And when I watched the movie Gattaca, I was so into Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman watching that movie, and I'd never seen this movie before, and I didn't know how to behave. Like, I didn't know how to act like normal when we were watching the scenes where they were like being really hot, and I just started laughing like really hard, like, because I just get nervous. Anyone who knows me knows that when I get nervous I just start laughing. And I got kicked out because my teacher was like, "You're not taking the movie seriously." And so yeah, it just felt really nice for me to hear Uma Thurman be like, you know, so she's like, "Yeah, I'm here. I see you, bisexuals."
Yeah.
But
that
the other
Pirates of
thing,
the Caribbean scene in Heartstopper was you watching Gattaca.
yeah, pretty
Yes,
much,
yeah.
But see, the thing is though, like, this movie haunts me, like the political ramifications. What are the political implications of this movie, the international implications of this movie, and the fact that they're making a sequel, and I just know that the sequel won't address any of this. Like, this film like haunt me just at the most random moments. It is the most thinly veiled, like, pink washing Harry and Meghan ass fan fiction. I truly think fiction like this should be like banned. I really do. You know, when we eventually do our like Good Omens ep, I really want to explain the difference between like fan fiction and rom-coms as genres, because like, I'm sorry guys, but these fan fiction ass films, they're not rom-coms. They're not rom-coms, and I think it's weird. I don't think they're even good stories. They make no sense. The worlds are not this. It stresses me out.
Yeah, I mean, I want to just finish this by saying that I really think that just gay people and gay teenagers, which is who this movie is made for, I'm assuming, they deserve better. We deserve better. I feel like, you know, there were maybe fans of the movies or the actors or the books or whatever were like, "Oh my god, but we should let gay people have their own like terrible rom-coms that are really shitty." And I'm like, why aren't you asking for something? Why aren't you demand something better, please? Because
have higher standards.
Yeah.
It's going to haunt me forever, unfortunately. But yeah, that's Red, White, and Royal Blue. Stream it on Amazon Prime if you want to.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Next up, we have A Strange Way of Life, directed by Pedro Almodovar. When this movie was first announced, Almodovar, who is famously critical of the film Brokeback Mountain, said that this would be his answer to Brokeback Mountain. And it's a 30-minute Yves Saint Laurent ad. Like,
you know, relating to what I just said about Red, White, and Royal Blue with Uma Thurman, you know, I watched this movie because I love Ethan Hawke. Literally 2 minutes into it, I was like, I want to leave. It was just rainbow capitalism. But I think what really affected me in my viewing experience of this movie, I saw it at a screening at Sydney Film Festival, and it was in a room full of people that I know for a fact were really just there because of the Pedro Pascal mania that was currently gripping the world at that time. And a lot of them just kept laughing whenever there was any kind of gay thing happening on the screen. And even though I don't like this movie. I think it's a terrible, I don't even want to call it a movie. I think it's a terrible commercial. It's a terrible commercial. I truly do hate being in rooms of people who find just the existence of gay people funny. And also, just on a side note, the clothes that they chose for this movie, they're so ugly. They look so bad. Like, there's this scene where he's wearing, like, a green denim getup, like, matching green jeans and green denim jacket. Hated it. I'm sorry, did Ethan Hawke vomit on you and you're trying to, like, hide it? Like, why is this the outfit?
Here's a movie you should watch if you can find it. It's called #LookAtMe.
I would love to watch this movie.
It's a Singaporean film directed by Ken Kwek. It's set in Singapore before the repealment of Section 377A of the British Penal Code, which criminalized consensual sex between gay men. So this film technically came out in 2022, but being in Australia, I didn't get an opportunity to see it until 2023. But this code in Singapore. It was only repealed in January 2023.
I hate colonialism, man.
Yeah, I hate colonialism and homophobia so much. It's unreal. So, #Look at Me. It's a story of a man who's imprisoned for speaking out against the church's homophobia online. He just does like a silly little video. He just makes a silly little meme out of himself. He himself is not gay, but his twin brother is. And this movie is just very wild and transgressive. It starts out as a comedy, but as it delves into the more serious issues, it gives you whiplash through many different genres and tones, because it has a look at not just the homophobia that the brother is facing, but also the main character's experiences in prison. And that's really fucking bad.
Mm-hmm.
It is a crazy movie that makes you feel many things very viscerally. I'm going to say I had a very negative reaction to the ending of the movie until I thought about it a bit more and realized that it actually does work, because this movie has its own kind of crazy logic to it. And it's just about how homophobia is reinforced by both the church and state.
It sounds like it's also about how those things aren't really that separate.
Yeah.
Jagged Mind, directed by Kelly Callie. So Jagged Mind is a lesbian time loop movie. It's about a Jamaican-American immigrant who's lesbian, and she has a terrible white ex-girlfriend who is using dark magic to trap her in a time loop where she can't escape the relationship. And really did appreciate the use of a time loop as kind of an allegory for being trapped in an abusive relationship. Yeah, this is one of those movies that, whether accidentally or on purpose, is also about how crappy it can be to be a person of colour dating a white person. It was very healing in a strange way, because at the beginning of the movie, the main character has a one-night stand with, I've forgotten her name, terribly sorry to her, but with this Egyptian American girl who plays Rami's cousin in Rami, and it was just like very healing for me to see this actress not being Rami's cousin who he sleeps with in Rami, and she's so pretty. I thought it was a really cool movie. I like movies about time loops that aren't trying to do the same thing that all time loop media does, where it's like, oh no, like, they have to learn to be a better person. Like, you know, I kind of like evil time loops.
Woo.
Next up.
Yeah, next up. Do you want to try saying it?
Three tidy tigers tighter.
Yeah, three tidy tigers tighter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also known as Three Sad Tigers in Portuguese. It's a Brazilian film directed by Gustavo Vinagre. And this is a very post-COVID movie. It's about 3 young queer people. They're trying to move around Sao Paulo during a pandemic that makes people lose their memories. It's just a really nice conversational sort of movie. Like, throughout the film, they have many conversations about being gay, being trans, like experiences with HIV, sex work, and grief from losing loved ones in a pandemic. And yeah, I think it really speaks to many parallel experiences to the HIV/AIDS epidemic of the 90s. And of course, what we have been experiencing with COVID. And I like how well this movie connects these two things while, you know, just being a movie about memory as well. So yeah, it's just really beautiful. It's really bright and colourful and also very funny. Next up, we've got Medusa Deluxe, directed by Thomas Hardiman.
This is a really fun, you know, filmed to look like it's all been done in one shot movies. So it's kind of a gay murder mystery movie, a gay whodunit.
Yeah, set at a hairdressing competition.
Yeah, it's set at a regional hairstyling contest. There's a handful of very colourful suspects, many of whom are gay. It's just a really fun movie. There is just so much in this movie that I kind of can't really compare to anything. It's a bit absurd. It's a bit absurdist. And the other thing is, the murder mystery is quite compelling. You're like, who did do this? Who did murder somebody over a regional hairstyling competition? You want to know. This movie got several genuine gasps out of me, you know? Not just because of the twist of, you know, who did the whodunit, but just absolute crazy moments in this movie. And because it's set at a hairstyling competition, the hairstyling and costuming in this movie is so much fun. Would genuinely love to see more movies that are just kind of crazy and fun like this. Even though I keep saying how kind of funny and kooky the movie is, the characters feel very real.
Yeah, there are just some great monologues from everyone in that movie. Next up, we have The Five Devils, directed by Leah Macius. It's about this weird little girl in France who has the ability to see people's memories by smelling their personal items.
I love that.
It's sort of a little bit time travel-y in that way. The little girl, main character, she is biracial. Her dad is black. Her mom is white, played by Adele Exarchopoulos. Her dad's sister, who has just got out of prison, comes to visit them. And so the little girl, she uses her powers to find out more about her auntie. And through this kind of time travel that she's doing, she discovers that her aunt and her mom used to be in love. They used to be lovers. This is a really fun little time travel movie that kind of looks at hidden relationships and things like that, but also the racism that this poor little girl faces in France. Like, her experience, it's not handled well. Not good. That's like one thing that really held me back from it. It's just cruel. That was disappointing. I think it's still worth a watch, but just be mindful of that going in. Next up, we have Passages, directed by Ira Sachs. This is a big win for loser bisexual representation. This also, Adele Exarchopoulos is also in this, also Ben Whishaw and Franz Rogowski, the lead. So it's just a great cast, and there's really great fashion. Franz Rogowski, he plays a filmmaker who's just wrapped on the movie that he's made, and he's working on it in post-production. He is married to Ben Whishaw, but he meets Adele Exarchopoulos and starts having an affair with her. And this movie, it spends too long being melodramatic before it decides to just be funny.
Aww.
But I think the performances are really great. Also, like, through this, it says a lot about not just the relationship drama, but also just stuff about the creative process and how that can feel like you're going in many different directions. When you're working post-production, it was very, very real to me. So next up we have Petit by Ruth Cordelli. This is a Colombian film about a lesbian throuple, and it's kind of like a slice of life documentary in its style. The one thing that annoyed me about Passages, right, is that I was promised a throuple movie. But then it just turned out
really
I know, but then it just turned out to be a cheating movie. So thank God at least we got Petit Mal. These three women, they live in a house together, and when kind of I'm going to call her the leader. There is definitely one person who the other two both prefer, and they compete for her affection. So I'm going to say when the leader of the throuple goes away on a business trip, the two others who are left alone at home, they realize that they don't really like each other. Left alone in this awkward dynamic shift. I think it's a really fun and very cute movie that looks at something very complicated. And it's really hot as well.
Nice.
Next up, Peafowl by Byung Sung-bin.
I love this movie. So this movie is about a trans woman in South Korea who... What's the type of dancing that she does called again?
She's a waka.
Yeah, she's kind of down on her luck at the moment, but then her father dies and she has to return to her hometown to do the traditional mourning rituals. And her gender complicates the expectations placed on her, like, culturally, like, during these... It kind of, reminds me of how Sort of does this too with Sabi and when their dad dies. And then on Binary, but because many of their family sees them as firstborn son, they've got these cultural expectations placed on them of what they have to do when their dad dies. And this movie kind of also speaks to that experience. And I can't speak to that experience specifically, but I really do love seeing it represented. Very compelling, It's compelling shit. I don't know how else to put that. And this movie, I just absolutely love it. It has the best sort of final sequence of a movie I've seen in ages. I just really, really love it. I felt like cheering when I was watching the sort of last 5 to 10 minutes of this movie. I also felt very kind of read for filth by a really funny moment in this movie where the main character, she goes to spiritualists to get her fortune read. She tells the spiritualist lady, like, when she was born, and she says 1994, which is the year I was born, and the lady responds, yes, the year of sadness. I was, like, absolutely decimated in the cinema.
That's why you're like this.
That's why I'm like this. I'm born in the year of sadness, guys. I also love how we see her returning to her hometown as a trans adult. She's looking out for the gay kids, teenagers in her hometown, and she tries to protect them from the ostracism that she's facing. I just went and saw this movie because it sounded interesting to me, and I really didn't expect to love it as much as I did. I really, really did love this movie. It was one of my favourite watches of last year.
Okay, next up, Anatomy of a Fall, directed by Justine Triet. We don't really have to talk too long about this one because everyone kind of knows it's great. It's very successful. It won the Palme d'Or. Even being like a non-English film, it made it to the Oscars. It's about a bisexual woman played by Sandra Hüller whose husband falls to his death from the third-story balcony of their home, and she's put on trial for murder because the police aren't able to determine confidently if it was an accident or not. And her bisexuality, it comes into play quite a lot during the trial and is used against her.
To me, it was like very reminiscent of the very real thing we've witnessed recently in recent years. Like Amber Heard is probably the biggest example where we've literally seen in a very public trial Amber Heard's bisexuality used by Johnny Depp's lawyers to invalidate her victimhood as a survivor of abuse and to just paint her as an unreliable witness to her own abuse and to honestly paint her as predatory within their own relationship. But you've also seen this in the way that Evan Rachel Wood has been talked about by Marilyn Manson. I mean, I do think that this happens even with women who aren't bisexual. I think women's sexuality has always been used in trial when women are put on trial, like even if they're straight, to invalidate them and to make them less human. Like, it didn't happen in the trial. It happened in the way that even when Megan Thee Stallion, in her court trial about being shot in the foot, you know, the way people spoke about Meg's sexuality, it's hideous. When I was watching Anatomy of a Fall, that scene in particular, but also the whole movie kind of speaks to the way that I think people will be misogynistic to women and try and put it in like a legal framework, but it's still just misogyny.
One thing that has confused me just about the response to the film is the way so many people make it about like, oh, did she do it or not? And that's not what the movie is about.
No.
Like, that's not what she's actually on trial for, and that's not actually a mystery that the movie even wants you to ask, in my opinion.
No.
But yeah, it's an Oscar-winning screenplay for a reason. Your generosity conceals something dirtier and meaner is like line of the year. My absolute favorite. Sandra Hüller was, she was my underdog in the Best Actress race this year. And also I think Swan Arlod looks like a very handsome lesbian. Yeah. Hot lawyer from Anatomy of a Fall, dyke face in chief.
Do you know how hard it is for me to admit that I find a French man attractive? Ugh.
I also just shout out to Camille Rutherford. I haven't seen her in a movie in a while, and it was just really nice. Also to Antoine Reinhardt, who he also plays Tybalt in 127 beats per minute, and so like kind of when I see him I have like a visceral reaction, like I don't like this guy, which worked because he's the prosecuting lawyer in this movie. Shout out to him, like he was hater of the year. It was such an amazing performance. I enjoyed it so much, and I still, you know, to this day I still get the PIMP instrumental stuck in my head. It was good. It was good. It's a good movie. Next up we have Monster, directed by Hirokazu Koreeda, which is my favorite movie of the year, personally. It's about many things. It's about how like one story has many layers underneath it. So it starts as a story about this mom, played by Sakura Ando. She was the lead in Shoplifters, who's worried about her son being abused by one of his teachers at school. And then it becomes a story about a teacher trying to stop bullying between his classmates. And then it becomes a story about these two boys who are actually friends, and possibly more than that, but they have to hide it from other people. I really love the way that this movie, it takes like a very familiar story and it peels back the layers of perspectives until it's just something we've never really seen before. Underneath so many common stories, there's just stuff that we never talk about because we never talk about homophobia.
One thing that frustrates me is how much media is out there clearly made by people who just had really awful teachers, and I do feel sorry for them in that regard, but I can promise you that the great majority of teachers, the things that they do, they're not doing to deliberately harm anybody. There's just so many factors at play in why teachers do certain things, and I think this movie does a really great job of acknowledging all those various forces that are at play, when how teachers are sort of expected to act in the best interests of everybody, and how that means that often they may not be able to act in ways that is actually the best for a child. What I really love about this movie is that everyone's just trying to do their best with the information that they have, and they're just trying to do everything with the best intentions. And I kind of love that because it's just very human.
Yeah, it really is. And yeah, the music's really beautiful. I think it's the last movie that Yuichi Sakamoto scored as well. Just a brilliant job, and also really great child performances as well. The kid that plays Hoshikawa, he's just a star. He really said be gay, do crimes somehow in the most adorable way possible. And yeah, I loved it. Beautiful movie. Okay, next up we have Theatre Camp, which is directed by Molly Gordon and Nick Lieberman, which is a very beautiful story about a theatre camp that's under threat of going under while its founder, played by Amy Sedaris, icon, is in a coma and is being taken over by her son, who is just the straightest man alive. It's a comedy, and I think it's a really beautiful story about the necessity of queer spaces for queer youth to be themselves and explore artistically what they can do. It's really great and funny, and I love Molly Gordon.
I love Molly Gordon. I love Ayo Adebri.
Oh yeah, she's in this for a bit.
I would love to see a movie where they're sort of actually more together. Like, I just think they're both so funny.
They're always like kind of in the same orbit, almost, but never. Yeah, they never do the kiss. That's fucked up.
I know. I was so excited when Molly Gordon was going to be in The Bear, and then she was, but she never interacted with Ayo Edebiri, even though like they're really good friends. Those two, like they're like, yeah. Anyway, what's that song? That song at the end.
Yes.
Should have been best
Camp
song.
Isn't Home is that song of the year. It was so pretty. I cried.
Yeah.
Obviously the main characters, they're all kind of the adults trying to run the camp. But it's got like so many excellent child performances in this movie as well.
Yes.
Little Alan S. Kim, like the kid from Minari, like he's also in it and he's a star as well. And just like everyone, like he's the one that I could recognize, but just like every little kid in this movie is great. Next up we have Cassandro, directed by Roger Ross Williams. It's a biopic about the real life Mexican lucha libre wrestler, Cassandro. He's being played by gay icon, Gael Garcia Bernal, honorary gay icon, or I don't know. He's a gay icon. He is
a gay icon.
He's for the people. He's for our people. Okay.
Friend of the podcast.
Friend of
Gael
he's done
Garcia
so
Bernal.
much for us. He's done so much for us. Anyways, it's a biopic, but it's also a sports movie. Guys, I don't know if you've listened to our biopic episode, but you know how we feel about them. But something really nice about this movie is it doesn't fall into the traps of most of biopics, and it's it uses like really unexpected tones and pacing, which I really like. This less focus and energy is placed on like the actual fight scenes because it's a story about visibility and masculinity in sport and about how that can be dragged because he was an openly gay wrestler, and he started out by playing a character that recurs in wrestling known as the Exotico, which is always like a really effeminate, queer-coded character who you're not meant to root for, and they always lose a fight. That's part of the performance. Cassandro is the character he plays, a gay Exotico, like a very
flamboyant,
out and proud Exotico wrestler character who wins. He actually wins. And and he fights to be able to win, and that's really beautiful.
Quite literally subverted the expectations.
Yeah, fights to change the narrative as well.
So I loved a lot of things about this movie. The costuming was my absolute favorite. I don't know if I've ever actually talked about this, but I grew up watching like a lot of WWE, and I still do watch it. Like I watch WrestleMania nearly every year. I really enjoy like the performance of wrestling. I think it's really fascinating, you know? Like it's a whole genre. Like there are conventions and characters and all this stuff. Like wrestling it's very rich. It's richer than people realize. So I really did enjoy this movie as someone who enjoys sort of wrestling as a casual viewer for most of my life. And I just think that Gael Garcia Bernal should give me all of his shirts in this movie. I would like them, please. They are just great shirts. All of them, every single one. Another thing I really loved about this movie is it has great lesbo-gaybo solidarity. Roberto Colindres plays Sabrina, who's Cassandro's coach. And I absolutely loved their friendship. There's a real sense of community in that I loved as well. Also, something I really appreciated about this movie is that sort of the message at the end is about how being out and visible to others, you know, being the first to do that is always really hard, but, you know, it does inspire others to do the same. But I think something that is very much a theme of this movie is that the acceptance of queerness in the context of performance, like in the context of him performing as and exotico, it doesn't necessarily translate to queer acceptance in real life. They are entertained by Cassandro, like playing this very flamboyant figure, and they enjoy watching him and even rooting for him throughout the film, but the film shows how this is never actually enough to make people not be homophobic. Representation is an important part of gaining visibility and gaining acceptance for your community, but it's not the end game. It's only like really the start, and there's still always work to be done. And I thought that this film was really clever in how it showed the way people really enjoyed, even towards the end, like people love Cassandro in the ring, but, in real life, he still can't be out with his lover and things like that.
Next up we have Bottoms by Emma Seligman, another gay fighting movie. It
was a good year for gay fighting movies.
It was a good year for gays beating the shit out of each other.
It was.
Yeah. So Bottoms, directed by Emma Seligman of Shiva Baby fame, starring Rachel Sennett and Ayoa Debris. It's a high school movie about these two lesbians that start a all-girls fight club to meet chicks, and it's so good.
It's so good.
It's so fun. It's so campy and funny. I don't know, watching this, it made me realize that, like, I've never had an original thought. This movie, it ticked all of, like, high school me's boxes.
Yeah.
It was like Fight Club meets Heathers, and I really, really loved that about it.
And guess who's in this? At the scene of the crime.
And guess who's at Nicholas Galatzine. I feel like something that would have made it better, I just wanted Edward Norton to show up for a bit.
Oh, yeah. Like
I was thinking about this. I'm like, how could Edward Norton possibly have shown up in this movie? And I think he could have been like the football commentator at the end. It's like, stop looking at the dykes. Stop looking at the dyke parade. Let's play some football. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I can totally imagine his voice saying that. That would have been fun. But no, just in general, like, I love how violent it was. It was not afraid to be so violent. It's ridiculous. And it's just good fun, you know?
The final showdown sequence, I think it's incredible. It is one of the best filmed battle sequences ever put to film. I love the costuming in this movie. I thought it was really fun, and I loved how it was bright and colourful, but also felt like a real, like you saw the way that they wore clothes and you were like, oh yeah, people would dress like this, and
the complicated by Avril Lavigne needle drop.
Yeah, the music. Emma Seligman, for me, she has a fan for life. I'll watch anything she does. I really will. What have we got next? We have My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3. Well, Dee, in the same way that you watched Bottoms and went, wow, I've never had an original thought. When I watched the My Big Fat Greek Wedding movies, I am so mad because they make me realize my family isn't special. My family is not unique. My family is actually pretty standard in terms of, being an ethnic Orthodox family. For anyone who doesn't know, who isn't Greek or Leb or, part of the Mediterranean ethnic group of people that watch these movies, My Big Fat Greek Wedding is kind of like just it's a trilogy now that follows this family over a while, like 20 years. The first movie is about the main character, played by Nia Vardalos, like getting married to a non-Greek man, and it's scandalous, okay? It is scandalous. And it was a rom-com. It was actually the most successful rom-com in 2002 when it came out. The second one was sort of about, like, meeting up with them, like, 10 years or 15 years later when they've got, like, a teenage daughter who's going off to college. And then the third one, so the sort of patriarch of the family dies, and to spread his ashes and honor his wishes of bringing his journal that he kept the whole time he lived in the US back to his childhood friends in his Greek village, the whole family ups and goes back to Greece. And a lot of members of the family haven't actually been to Greece before. So it's like really cute. It's them like, reconnecting with their roots. And weirdly, this movie has a genuine, like, very heartfelt attempt to represent a non-binary character. And that just made me really emotional because growing up for a long time, this film was, like, really the only film my family could watch and kind of relate to. And so, like, I don't know, it feels momentous that there's a film that my family will watch, Like, everyone in my family will watch this movie that has, like, a non-binary character in it. The reason they all come back to Greece is because they're invited for this big village reunion, and the person organising it is a character called Victory, who is the mayor of the town. But to say that, the village has 6 people living there. They are the mayor of 6 people. They're non-binary. The way this is conveyed is, I don't think it's perfect. I think it's more like Nyad, who wrote this movie and directed it. I don't know how she came to this. Maybe she has someone who's non-binary in her life, or maybe she just came across it and thought it would be nice to put it in the movie. But it's explained in quite a funny way, where Victory interacts with one of the aunties, one of the Greek aunties. Andrea Martin's iconic character asks Victory, like, do you prefer boys' clothes or girls' clothes? And Victory responds, both and neither. And Andrea Martin, iconic Greek auntie in this movie, responds with, oh yes, well, my daughter is divorced 3 times and my son is gay, so I know a lot about alternative lifestyles. The other way they convey kind of Victory's non-binariness in this movie is that there is a subplot in the movie when they get to the village. They find out that there's this local Syrian girl who's been living there since she became a refugee. And she's fallen in love with this Greek boy. And the Greek boy's family, grandmother, doesn't want him marrying a non-Greek. Specifically doesn't want him marrying a refugee. Specifically doesn't want him marrying the Syrian girl. I don't really like that the movie portrays this as kind of the same as in the first movie, when Nyad family don't want her to marry like a white American guy. The reason I don't like this is because Greeks are very racist to Arabs, and I don't think it's the same at all. Of course, like, because this is My Big Fat Greek Wedding movie, the grandmother eventually comes around and they host this big wedding between the Syrian girl and the Greek boy. That is the Big Fat Greek Wedding in My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3. At the wedding, the Syrian girl says that they should perform a dubki, a Syrian dubki that's performed by women. And then the Greek family are like, do their version of dubki. They don't call it dubki, I forget what they call it, but it's only for the men. And in this scene, which is very cute, very nice, I love a bit of dancing, especially traditional dances, Victory just swaps between the two and does both dances, which I actually think it's just nice. There is like a genuine intention in this movie to kind of show that Victory is non-binary, even though that's never quite said out loud, and Victory never asks anyone to use particular pronouns. Everyone just refers to them as Victory. I don't think it's a gay movie in the sense that it's about anyone being gay in particular. It's just important to me. It's just special to me. And even in the second one, the eldest son of Andrea Martin's character, he comes out as gay in the second one. So like there has been like a consistent effort, at least in the last 2 movies, to like be inclusive of this experience like within an ethnic family. And the reason he's never come out, even though he's like 50 years old, is because he's worried about what they will think. So, you know, it's very casual. It's very much like a little subplot in both movies, but you know, it's there and it's nice. You know, even though it's not, you know, an Australian movie, it is like a very important WOG cinema staple.
It's very important to the community here.
Yeah, it is. No, seriously, it is. Like every WOG family you talk to, they're like, oh yeah, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Like it's you know, we watch it once a month. you know. Like, next up. Oh, another one from me. My Animal, directed by Jacqueline Castell. This is a lesbian werewolf movie about a family who live on the outskirts of a small town somewhere that's very, very up north in America because there's lots of snow and it's very, 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 very cold. The father and the daughter are both werewolves. The daughter has inherited this gene from her father and...
Is this Amanda Stenberg's character?
No.
Okay.
Amanda Stenberg's character is her lover. Mostly this movie is just kind of vibes. There's not a lot of dialogue in it. It's mostly just you see this girl and her dad struggle with this thing the dad's wife, she hates both of them for this thing, this sickness, that's what she calls it. And so it's, you know, very obvious, like one of those sort of allegorical, which, you know, all good werewolf stories are like allegories for bigotry in some way. I'm not sure what it's trying to say about being gay other than, you know, it's kind of like hunger, you know, like it's a little bit of lesbian desire, kind of like hunger. The lesbian sex scenes in this movie are like are very artsy.
Okay.
It's also an ice skating movie because Amanda Stenberg is an ice skater, and the main character, when she's not, agonizing over being a werewolf and watching VHS tapes at home, she's a jock. She's a hockey goalie.
Oh.
So this is like a romance between her as a hockey goalie and Amanda Stenberg, who is like trying to figure skate her way into the Olympics.
Next up is Nyad, directed by Elizabeth Chai Vasarely and Jimmy Chin. So this one is another sports biopic about Nyad, who is a woman who holds the record for swimming from the Caribbean to Florida Keys, and she's a lesbian. Yeah, so she's played by Annette Bening, who got an Oscar nomination. It felt more like a legacy nomination, more for like Annette Bening's whole career, but it is like she does do a really good job. And Jodie Foster is there playing her best friend. It's a pretty standard sports movie about endurance and stuff. Like it does get you, like
pretty standard sports biopic,
Yeah, pretty standard. But the thing about sports movies is like they do get you.
Yeah, the good ones get you.
Like they're all the same, but they can get you.
The last 20 minutes, I was crying.
Just sobbing, sobbing.
Just and sobbing.
It's just
like, yeah, she's gonna make it. She's gonna do it.
Like Jodie Foster and Annette Bening, like they love each other so much, and it's wow. Most important headline here is that Jodie Foster she's just very hot and beautiful and tank in this.
Oh, so tank.
That's one of the main reasons I'd recommend people watch it.
The element of this movie that really made it for me is it really shows you like how horrific trying to complete a long distance swim is. Like
the ocean is so terrifying, man.
The ocean is terrifying. Next up, It's Only Life After All. This is a doco about the Indigo Girls. They're a legendary lesbian folk duo, and they sort of came to fame during sort of the late 80s, 90s, the height of their recognition, if you like. And the documentary is about like what that was like for them, being an out lesbian folk band with quite a bit of success and visibility in a time that was still relatively quite, homophobic. They even talk about like how literally after Ellen came out in the 90s, like that made things easier for them. It's also about, in many ways, how lesbians were portrayed in media during the 90s and how that affected them. Next up, Dipped in Black, directed by Matthew Thorne and Derek Lynch. This film is about Derek Lynch, who is a queer young Kanjara theatre artist, as he returns to his hometown of Apachula in the Northern Territory.
Of Australia?
Yeah, in Australia. So for those who may not know, Derek is an Aboriginal man, First Nations person, and he returns to his hometown to perform Imma, it's like a performance you do when someone close to you dies. He's also a queer person, and he sort of reflects on what it was like growing up for him, not only what it was like for him growing up in a remote Indigenous community just in general, because that is a struggle experience within itself, but also just growing up as a queer man in that community and then moving to Adelaide and Melbourne, which is usually can be a very like jarring experience. Not only because, when you come from a very remote, small Indigenous community, but because the way people treat Aboriginal people from remote communities in this country is not very nice. It's a documentary, but it's also kind of like a narrative short film as well. It's kind of a mix of both. And it actually ends very similarly, I think, to the movie Peafowl. It's a very victorious movie, like Derek returning to his home fully able to be himself. We don't get a lot of films about Aboriginal people who are LGBT, so I really love this movie because it's an experience that's very much erased a lot of the time.
So next up we have Sisi and I, directed by Frauke Finsterwalder. It's a historical fiction movie set in the 19th century about Elizabeth, the Empress of Austria, also known as Sisi. And it centers on a toxic relationship that she has with her lady-in-waiting, played by Sandra Hüller. Sandra Hüller plays the main character, and it's about her experiences in Sisi's inner circle. Yeah, no, Sandra Hüller, like she's
booked and busy.
With all the gay roles.
Booked and busy, yeah.
Yeah, real busy. And it's described on Wikipedia as a black comedy, but I don't know how I feel about that. It's like a psychological kind of slow burn, in my opinion, about the main character hating Sisi and then becoming more obsessed with her, and then through that becoming in love, with her, and how the power dynamic really affects that. It's a good watch. It's very fun. It's very pretty, obviously. It's an opulent period drama about an empress. I should have looked into this, but I do want to know, there are a lot of fictionalized biopics about this queen, about Sisi.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. We had Corsage just the previous year as well, and then there's so many Sisi movies, and it's
she's
interesting.
Bitch,
she's a character, I guess, that people find fascinating, and yeah, she's a real piece of work in this.
All right.
Very homoerotic movie. Would recommend. As someone not familiar with the history, I had a lot of fun with it. Next up, we've got Blue Jean, directed by Georgia Oakley.
Set in the 80s in England, and it's about how Margaret Thatcher's Section 28 law prohibiting the promotion of homosexuality affects a lesbian PE teacher, and how it complicates her life when one of her students, who is also very probably a lesbian, sees the teacher at a gay club. When she sees the student in the club, I thought, oh no, is this going to be one of those like teacher-student movies? You know, forbidden, problematic romance kind of movies. It is actually very much not that. It is more about how Section 28 really just made gay people in the UK just so paranoid about the most innocuous interactions with their colleagues, with their peers, with their friends. It really just kind of corrodes relationships. What I really loved about this movie is that it's a good teacher movie in the sense that she does actually keep trying to protect this student, even though it puts her at risk. In the same way that Monster is very much about how people are sometimes just doing the best they can, but it still comes off as something that's hurtful or harmful, this movie is very much that as well.
Next up is In Her Words, 20th Century Lesbian Fiction, directed by Lisa Marie Evans and Marianne K. Martin. I don't have a lot to say about this movie. It's a documentary about lesbian literature in the West from the 1920s to the 90s. It's just a really nice little timeline of all these different lesbian authors talking about their art and their fellow lesbian authors' art. It's just got lots of nice little book recs as well. It's like with that film Dykes Camera Action. It's just like, I love seeing lesbians just talk about lesbian art
so nice
and
that
about
you're
each
all
other,
friends.
and
it's so nice that you're all here.
It's not maybe you aren't all friends, but you all admire each other. You all keep an eye on each other because that is what we do.
Next up, another doco called El Dorado, in brackets, Everything the Nazis Hate, on the history of how Germany's queer community was impacted not just by the Nazis but by anti-gay laws in general, because those laws existed before the Nazis came in, but they were obviously much more extreme once the Nazis came to power. I say it's a really good introductory kind of overview because a Netflix documentary should never be your only source for anything. But it really opened my eyes to a lot of things I wasn't aware of, and they interview quite a few gay survivors and gay Jewish survivors of the Nazi regime who are all in their 90s and 100s, which is very bittersweet hearing their stories, but it's also very lovely. Like I've said many times, I just love hearing from older gay people and trans people. They also, throughout this documentary, speak to a bunch of gay Jewish historians who have sort of dedicated their lives to studying Germany's queer history and specifically how the Nazis reshaped Germany's queer culture. And I say reshaped is a very kind word. They obliterated it. And one thing that pointed out in this documentary is that Germany's queer culture has never really recovered. It's never fully recovered from what the Nazis put in place. Next up we have Transition, which is a documentary I again watched at Sydney Film Festival and thought it was worth mentioning in the sense that I found it just a very strange watch personally. It's directed by Jordan Bryan, who is this Australian trans man who is also a award-winning journalist, and he made a whole documentary about the fact that he embedded himself with the Taliban and he felt weirdly accepted by them because they did not clock him as a trans man. And by extension, this documentary is also about what it's like for trans people who are doing HRT in Iran, which I did find quite interesting, but it is mostly centered on this man and his time spent with the Taliban. I'm still not quite sure what he was trying to say with this. Just as an Arab person, I found it quite bizarre for a white person to be so excited by acceptance from the Taliban in this way, presenting their acceptance of him as something affirming and kind of like a game in a strange way. I just didn't like it.
It's just bizarre.
It's just bizarre. That's why I just say that it's bizarre, because I don't know how else to put it. Like, when I watched this movie, I also had to present a Q&A with this director. He's a very lovely man, and he was very gracious in answering the questions that I had, like, because I had a lot of questions that I wanted to ask, even though I was technically only presenting the Q&A. I was like, no, I have to ask him what made him want to present the Taliban this way. I had to put this movie on the list because where else am I going to talk about it but here? Just a bizarre documentary. I think it's really encapsulated for me by the fact that when he comes home to Australia, he says that he felt more accepted by the Taliban than he did in LGBT spaces in Sydney.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at his experiences, but also I just... That's how bad Sydney gays are.
If this is true, I mean, I'm not based in Sydney. I can't speak to this. But if this is true, no. Sydney gays, can you please do better? The Taliban is beating you on acceptance, apparently. You need to do better. You need to do better. Like, please, just do better so I never have to see anything like this ever again, please.
I'm so sorry for laughing.
That sentiment is also quite sad to me on a level, but also I just can't handle a white Australian man trying to, in however, like, maybe unintentional way, trying to sell the Taliban as progressive to me. I can't handle it.
I'm glad he survived.
I am happy that he made it through.
I'm very happy that he made it through. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Ek Jaga Apni, also known as A Place of Our Own. So this is a film by the Afire Collective, which is like an independent group of artists in India. And it's a fictional film, but it does feel like a bit like a documentary at times. So it's the story of a trans woman in Bhopal, India, and she's trying to find a new place to live after being evicted by her transphobic landlord. So it's a movie that follows her and her best friend, who is also trans, trying to find a place to live, and it looks at how they're treated in casual society, like their employers to sort of everyday shopkeepers and journalists and landlords, and also even like in sort of intellectual, supposedly feminist allyship circles and feminist academics. And throughout the movie you also see how they adjust the way that they present in order to stay safe. It's a very simple movie, but I think it's a really strong film about just resilience, which was really nice to see. It's quite heavy for its subject, but it never feels completely miserable because these people are so strong.
Okay.
Next up is Afire.
Afire. I watched this movie. It's directed by Christian Petzold. It's a German movie. It's about two friends who go on a retreat in a remote German beach town to work on their art while forest fires are closing in on them. And when they get there, it's been double booked by this woman who's there. I don't know, sort of shenanigans ensue. One of the two friends is bi and falls in love with the woman's boyfriend. It's kind of funny. You think he's kind of flirting with the woman, but then it's like, oh no, actually, he wants her hot lifeguard boyfriend. Which, okay, cool. This movie took a very bleak turn, and I'm not sure how to feel about it. It feels like this movie was trying to say something about climate change, which I think is a very weird plot to do that with.
What, you don't think climate change affects bisexual people, Merryana?
I do. Obviously I do, but like, it's just weird that I'm sat watching like these two artists on a retreat arguing about their, photography portfolios and unwritten novels, and then there's this kind of weird love triangle thing happening, and then they might get burnt alive. I suppose that is the point.
Next up, Bad Things.
Directed by Stuart Thorndike. Bad Things is a Shudder original movie.
Ooh.
It is basically a Shudder original movie that's like, what if The Shining was about a bunch of gay women? It's about a woman who inherits an abandoned hotel from her great aunt or grandmother or something, and she invites her girlfriend and gay friends to stay with her there over the weekend while she figures out if she's going to sell the place or not. And horror and horniness ensues because the place is haunted. It has Hari Neff in it. It has Annabelle Dexter-Jones, aka Naomi Pierce from Succession. It was very cheap, as many Shudder originals are, but, I thought there was the bones of something really fun and spooky in there. So, yeah, okay. Had a good time. That's all I really have to say about it. Next up, All the Colours of the World in Black and White. It's directed by Babatunde Apalowo. It's a Nigerian romance about a gay man falling in love in Lagos. I believe it's the directorial debut for the director, and it's one of Nigeria's very few queer films. I loved in this movie that the city really has that, city as a character in of itself vibe. Personally, I've never seen Lagos portrayed like that, and I really loved it. Like, there's a lot of focus on, like, the kind of art that's all around the city and things like that.
Next up we have The Critic, directed by Anand Tucker, of Leap Year 2010, starring Amy Adams fame.
Can I just say, when Daya kept telling me about this movie, they were like, oh, it's got Ben Barnes and Gemma Arterton, and I was like, yeah, all right, but what's the story about? Tell me what the story about. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. And then they were like, oh, it's directed by Anand Tucker, who directed Leap Year. I was like, fuck, where can I go see it?
Oh, okay. I don't really...
That's how serious I am about Leap Year.
Honestly, that's actually not a selling point for me. Because Anand Tucker famously hates Leap Year.
I don't care how he feels.
I feel like he doesn't want you to have fun, and that applies to this movie as well. But anyway, The Critic has a very, very fun premise because it's a gay blackmail movie, right? Where Ian McKellen...
You're like, I love it when gay people get blackmailed.
Yeah, no. It's a gay blackmail movie, but it's the gay doing the blackmail instead. Oh, amazing. Subverts the trope.
Amazing.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's main character, Ian McKellen. He's a theatre critic who's known to be just, like, absolutely savage. And he's running around ruining straight people's lives, which is really fun as a concept, right? But instead, the film it always portrays it in a very, like, solemn tone that just stops you from having fun, which, I know it's bad to blackmail people and whatever, and, technically what he's doing is reprehensible, but, let me win, like, like, I feel like every actor in this movie wants it to be fun. You do get that energy from it, but just constantly the tone is just brought down through other aspects of the direction. It's got an absolutely stacked cast. In addition to Ian McKellen, you have Gemma Arterton and Ben Barnes. You've got Mark Strong, and you also have Alfie Enoch plays he plays Ian McKellen's. Yeah, he plays his boyfriend, and they're really great together. Ben Barnes and Alfie, their characters don't really interact, but there is a scene where they're kind of just in the background of the main conversation, just chilling and talking with each other, and I'm like, oh, this is a crossover in my heart, This is an important crossover for me. I would recommend watching the movie if you really love the cast, because they're all excellent in it, but also I think, like, he's such a hater. Like, he doesn't want you to have fun with this, which I don't understand. And I don't understand, but, like, when I think about the fact that he hates Leap Year as well, like, I kind of do. Next up, Asteroid City, directed by Wes Anderson, which I'd had no idea this was a gay film until you watched it very late in the year and told me so.
Yeah, so this movie has, like, a Trojan horse gay story. So Asteroid City is about actors putting on a play and about how that play came to be in existence. So the behind the scenes is in kind of sepia tone, black and white, and the play is in, like, what do you call that?
Kodachrome.
It's Kodachrome.
It's in really bright Kodachrome.
Really bright, really saturated. The play is about a man on a road trip with his kids who's trying to figure out how to tell them their mother is dead. They stop in Asteroid City for a science fair where there's an alien invasion and the town goes into lockdown. So it's, he's trapped with his kids and has to figure out how to tell them this. That's the part the trailer kind of sells as the movie. And obviously it is part of the movie. It's a big part of the movie. But how the play came about is very gay. The lead actor of the play Asteroid City, who is Jason Schwartzman's character, is gay. And he is in love with the playwright played by Edward Norton. The subtext of this entire play is that the lead actor is in love with the person who created the work that he is performing, and that informs every aspect of the story. I loved this so much, like more than I thought, when everything's been peeled back and you understand what you're actually watching. I was so emotional, man. It's about love. It's about grief, it's about love. Yeah, it's beautiful. Oh. I really actually loved Asteroid City a lot. Like, something that I've always loved about Wes Anderson, and I think is really key to understanding, like, how he makes his films, is that it's all about the melancholy that underpins that whole kind of bright aesthetic. he's very on form with that with Asteroid City.
That's good to hear, because, like, I don't know. I know it's kind of cool right now to bag on Wes Anderson, because he is basic bitch cinema, in my opinion. He's very, like, entry-level indie. But his movies are good.
Yeah.
When I was a teenager, I watched everything he ever made. And I loved that melancholy that he always managed to explore in some way. But then, like, everything after Grand Budapest to me was just too immature.
Yeah.
You know? So I had this feeling for the last couple of years that, like, oh, maybe I'm just, like, too... Like, I've just outgrown this guy. And there is quite a bit of homophobia in his movies anyway. So, yeah, that's nice that he managed to make a nice gay story despite his history of homophobia. So that's nice to hear. Okay, next up we have Rustin, directed by George C. Wolfe, which is a biopic about Bayard Rustin, who was a gay black civil rights activist and a close friend of Martin Luther King Jr. He's also the one behind organizing the March on Washington in 1963. Yes. And so this film is about him doing that organization.
It's about him coordinating.
Yeah, it's about him doing all that, coordinating all of that, and the, like, various levels of politics and bureaucracy he faces throughout that. He's being played by Coleman Domingo, who we love, gay actor, and he was the most stylish man of the 2024 awards season. His performance is brilliant, of course. Unfortunately, the movie it's a very standard cookie cutter paint by numbers biopic that doesn't really give a lot for him to work with, but I think his performance is still really great and very compassionate.
Watch this movie for him.
Yeah, this movie for him. I didn't know a lot about this. It did spur me on to do my own research about him, which is nice. And I'm just really impressed by his organizational skills, you know?
Yeah.
That was the main thing that I really loved about it. It's just fun seeing, like, people just be so competent, you know? Next up, we have
Mutt. Mutt. Directed by Vuk Golov Klutz. It is a day in the life of a Chilean trans man as he's trying to mend all his relationships. And it's kind of, you know, you do watch him come out over and over again. I really like films about trans men, just because I feel like we don't see them very often. So I just really appreciated this movie on that level. The fact that this film is kind of set over a day, it makes it very easy to engage with, because you know he's doing this over one day, so you're watching him like, oh, is he gonna get to all the things that he wants to do?
So productive.
Yeah, he's very productive. Okay, next up we have the Persian version, directed by heck we wish friend of the podcast Maryam Kashavez, Iranian-American bicon who directed Circumstance fame. This movie is very much for the gays of colour with mummy issues gang. Stand up, make some noise. It is about... It is about a lesbian who has a one-night stand with a guy and becomes pregnant. For this reason, a lot of people said that it was a bad movie. But she is a lesbian, decides she wants to keep the baby, and this prompts her to kind of unpack her family history. Has some fun fourth wall breaks that the character does that's really nifty. And as she unpacks her family history, it's kind of her unpacking the intergenerational trauma of her mum, her grandma, and kind of learning about what her mum went through when she was pregnant. And it's very emotional. The final sequence of the movie is a real tearjerker. If you're from an immigrant family like this, and there's just so much happening. I think one thing that's also really fun about this movie is she's like the only girl in her family, and she's got like 6 brothers.
Oh no.
So yeah, she's kind of got the deck stacked against her in a lot of ways when it comes to like acceptance from
and
her mum.
She's gay. My God.
Yeah. But this movie it's about her trying to understand her mum because her mum doesn't understand her.
Okay. That's nice. Next up we have Maestro, which was directed by Bradley Cooper and written by Bradley Cooper and starring Bradley Cooper and an executive. Yeah. Anyways, so this is a biopic about Leonard Bernstein, who is a very successful musician and conductor, whose queerness the public was very aware of. I don't know anything about music history. I knew very little about Leonard Bernstein, and this movie actually told me nothing about him. I didn't even know that what he was famous and unique for was his like expressive conducting style until like one of my musical friends told me so afterwards. Like I didn't know. Like I saw him doing all that stuff and I didn't know. I didn't know that that's what made him special. Sorry.
Do you think Bradley Cooper knows? Do you think Bradley Cooper knows?
This is a really, like, not just the fact that it's just like a shitty biopic for many reasons. It's really odd that this biopic, instead of, you know how like most music biopics and stuff, they begin with like, you know, the struggle on the way to becoming great. So this movie, it begins at the moment of his overnight success, and it's just a movie about a guy who just keeps getting more and more successful. Like, he just keeps winning, you know?
And it's so
he just all he does is win, no matter what. While his wife, played by Carey Mulligan, glares at him from the corner because she hates that he's having sex with men. And
this movie is Carey Mulligan.
Literally, like at
I know
first,
what you are.
At first, I kind of enjoyed that, like the casualness in which like his gay relationships was presented, but then it became like very apparent that the entire plot was just about his wife being a hater, and I just don't. I didn't have a nice time. I think something that people should get into their heads is that a consistent accent is not a good performance. And also you know, the nose prosthetics were that's a hate crime. That's a hate crime. You know, yeah. I'm not Jewish myself, but it felt very I felt very upset by it. Also, can I just say there's a really random needle drop driving in his car up to the academy where he's about to do a conducting lesson or whatever, and End of the World is playing on the radio really loud, and it's literally just the line that mentions, like, you know, Leonard Bernstein, and then he parks and turns off the car like immediately. And what? Yeah, okay, anyway, stop giving Bradley Cooper money. He needs to stop directing himself because he needs someone else keeping him in line. I'll just say that. Okay. All right. Next up, worst movie of the year. I have not felt so much visceral hatred towards a movie since in a very long time. Okay. So there's Saltburn, directed by Emerald Fennell. I'm not going to summarize it. I don't give a shit. I'm just going to say, I think Emerald Fennell ripping off historically queer texts and the styles of queer filmmakers like Joseph Losey and Xavier Dolan to tell the most homophobic and class-phobic story possible is just the worst. I think straight women have no fucking business making I'm not going to say that you shouldn't, you know, tell stories about queer characters who are problematic and do all this like crazy irredeemable shit, but like I think a straight woman has no fucking business doing that. I hate everything about it. I hate that she claims that she wasn't inspired by Ripley.
Oh, she's so fucking lying. She is such a fucking liar.
Another thing I just want to say, like everyone that I've in my life that I've complained to this movie about is just like, oh, but you know, like the aesthetic was really good, or the music is really good, or like, oh, Jacob Elordi is so hot, and like it's so cool seeing a handsome man shot and like through such a female gaze. Listen, I think it's fucking ridiculous that directors like Emerald Fennell and Greta Gerwig, they're being sort of credited now over the last couple of years for like bringing the quote-unquote female gaze into the mainstream, when actually just a lot of the time what they are doing is they are just appropriating the gay gaze and copying the styles of gay independent filmmakers. Like, I hate that.
And no one understands how much I want Dare to write an essay about this and publish it somewhere.
Yeah, I don't. I
know you don't have time, but
I don't like to spend so much time on what I hate, like writing it down, you know? I need to get the poison out by like yelling. And then okay. I'm fine. You know, I'll be normal in a bit, you know. I've been normal about Saltburn, but, you know, for this, I had to bring it up again. And now I'm like, I'm fired up.
I have nothing to say about this movie. And everyone who... I actually think that if you like this movie, it's a sign that I'm going to fucking hate you.
See, the thing is, like, Saltburn, if a movie like this was made in the 90s, like, the directors don't even have to be queer or not. Like, it would have absolutely flopped, right? Just flopped financially, but it would have become a cult classic for the gays, right? It would have been important to someone. I don't think a film like Saltburn should exist on this level of success, you know?
Nope.
If it had to exist, it could not exist now in the mainstream as it does. So yeah, fuck that movie. Okay, moving on to a much nicer movie. All of Us Strangers, directed by Andrew Hai, starring Andrew Scott, who we love, who Mary and I have been in the trenches for over a decade because of, you know,
it's been
our
a long
past.
Time. Because of our particular and general history.
Because of our particular and general history. So Andrew Scott plays a man, I think he's a writer, and he lives in a very mostly empty apartment building. But there's, you know, Paul Mescal downstairs, just looking hot outside the window, you know, posing. I feel like this movie was marketed as a romance between them, but it's mainly just about the main character played by Andrew Scott. And he goes in to visit the house where he grew up, his childhood home. And there he sees the ghosts of his dead parents who died when he was very young. So it's a story about him like conversing with his parents as a grown-up about all that's happened to him and coming out and imagining all the ways that they would have reacted and spoken about how they treated him, and him thinking about like how he would forgive them had he the chance. This movie, it's based on a short story by Japanese author Taichi Yamada, and the short story, it's not gay at all. And I think
oh, so they made it gay?
Yeah, so they made it gay. Andrew Hyde made it gay. But like I think right now in the West there's a lot of online talk about the quote-unquote loneliness epidemic. But the thing is, like, this sort of exploration of loneliness that you see in All of Us Strangers, this is explored in a lot of art from multiple Asian countries and storytelling, like, for quite some time now. Often it's about how living amongst like a high population can make you feel too overwhelmed to engage in like such an overstimulating environment. And this, like, there's a lot of, you know, Asian stories about gay loneliness as well, where this is like exacerbated because you also, amongst all of this, you also feel culturally ostracized. And so there's movies like Vive l'Amour, as well as other films like Rebels of the Neon God and even Happy Together and Fire and Sisterhood by Tracy Choi. Those are really similar films that already explore something like this. And so I think of All of Us Strangers as being very much in the spirit of these films that I love. And yeah, it's just nice. And it's also interesting seeing this theme being brought into Western cinema and featuring more prominently, given, you know, how society's going, you know? But yeah, Andrew Hyde, he's known for Gay Film Weekend. So along with the whole ghost thing, there's a lot of really great sort of weekend style conversations between Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal's character, and they're exploring like the generation gap between gay people, and there's just lots of nice, very, very real, very grounded conversations. Next up, I've put Eileen. I've put Eileen, directed by William Oldroyd, who directed Lady Macbeth, which is probably one of the reasons why I gave this movie a shot, because it is based on the worst fucking book I've ever read. And I couldn't finish this movie because, you know, it's after 20 minutes, you know, I realized like, oh, this is based on the worst fucking book I've ever read, and that's not gonna change anything about how I feel about it. So
it's still the story.
Yeah, it's still very much what it is, and that's, you know, okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. Next up, Split, directed by Alma Jodorowsky. Apparently this was originally like a web series, but we watched it together like at a film festival, and it was presented like as a feature film. So it's about a stunt woman in France. She develops a relationship with the actress that she's doubling for as they work on a biopic about Musadora, who was a French silent film actress who played Irma Vep in The Vampire. This movie is really interesting to me because I think it's sort of like a lesbian answer to the 1996 film Irma Vep with Maggie Cheung, which a lot of people regard as a lesbian film, but I don't really agree with that. So I think this movie instead is a very interesting take on exploring that.
I had mixed feelings on this movie, if I'm being perfectly honest, but I did enjoy many elements of it. Honestly, if I'm being really real, the thing I hated about this movie was the sound design, but that's because like I really hate bodily noises.
Yeah, there's a lot of the sex scenes are very noisy.
Yeah, there's lots of and I'm like, I don't want to hear that. Elements of it were underdeveloped, I felt. But when it knew what it was doing, Yeah. You know, I really like when fictional women get abortions. And the movie is very honest about that experience. And yeah, I just appreciate that. Really isn't something we still see that often in things.
Okay, next up we have The Missing, directed by Carl Josef Papa. This was the Philippines' entry for Best International Feature. The Oscars, they didn't even shortlist it, but, you know, it was nice that it was chosen. It's an animated feature using rotoscope and 2D animation, and it's exploring the story of a young gay man who doesn't have a mouth. And as you continue to watch the story, you do realize that it's about him dealing with like the impact of child sex abuse that he experienced. It's got Dolly de Leon in it, being iconic.
There's so much love in this movie. Watching this movie, I felt like it was like a hug. We did miss the start of this movie when we went to see it, because we booked 2 movies straight after each other, and yeah. One of my favourite moments in this movie is the main character who has no mouth. He's hanging out with his crush. You know, we talk a lot about how, oh no, there's only like one bed tropes, but there's this really lovely moment. The character, when he has like panic attacks, for lack of a better word, he needs to crawl under a table or under a bed. And he has one of these kind of attacks, and he runs to be underneath the table. And his friend, who's also, you know, kind of his crush, his boyfriend, you know, he takes a pillow under there. And they both just lie down there and like share like on the one pillow. And I was like, wow, you know, we talk about that there's only one bed, but what about when there's only one pillow, you know? Like, it's beautiful. I just really loved how compassionate this movie was for the issues that it was dealing with. The animation, the way it's used in this movie, is absolutely beautiful. When we went to see it, there was a Q&A with the director afterwards, and we got to hear all the work that went into this animation, like both the 2D animation and the rotoscope. Sometimes I think when you watch a Q&A with a director, they'll say, like, this is what I intended with this, and you sort of go, oh, was it? But I really loved, like, every kind of decision he explained I was like, oh, yeah, and it did that, so.
Yeah. It's really cool because, you know, obviously there's the rotoscoping of the actors' performances, but also, you know, with the animation, they do get very creative with the world that they're in. They do get more surreal with it, and that way you can convey a lot of things with that, which I really loved. Next up, we have Queen of My Dreams, directed by Fawzia Mirza, which is the movie that we were watching that made us late for The Missing. One thing about The Missing is, like, when we were running into the cinema, like, the director was there, and I was like, sorry. Okay. But yeah, so Queen of My Dreams, directed by Fawzia Mirza, who is a lesbian Pakistani-Canadian filmmaker. It's a multiple timeline story about a Pakistani-Canadian lesbian at uni. It's set in the 90s, about her returning to Pakistan when her father dies. It's multiple timelines in that you have the story set in the 90s, but you also have flashbacks to the 60s about her mother's life in Pakistan. This film is really fun, sort of meta about Bollywood tropes. It uses the 60s film Aradana a lot, like through music and also through homage to tell the story. So the main character, played by Amrit Kaur, she plays the main lesbian daughter character, but she also plays her mom in the flashbacks, which is like something that they poke fun at in an earlier scene when they're watching Aradana, because that's what happens quite a bit in Aradana and quite a few other Indian films.
I kind of love that about the movie, though, because it kind of explains to you what it's doing.
Yeah, it tells you really what it's doing, which is really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. When it's first like in the 90s timeline, I'm like, oh my god, why is her dad just like some guy wearing like really old people makeup? Back to it. In the 90s, the character, she travels back to their family home. Of course, there's like many funeral rituals that you need to go through in Islam and also just in Pakistani culture that women are excluded from. And so it presents that frustration in the main character in the 90s. At the core, it's also about her relationship with her mom, who is the evil mom in polite society as well. So so there was some intertextuality there. There is her mom, who is homophobic and quite conservative. And through the flashbacks in the 60s, you see that, you know, Pakistan was not like that back then. It's an interesting story about how, like, through moving to the West, to Canada, that's what influenced her mother to become more conservative and more protective in order to kind of preserve and defend her original culture. Yeah, I really appreciated seeing that, because that is very much a phenomenon that happens to immigrant families here, where you just end up just like in an attempt to preserve your culture and stay true to it, you just end up letting it restrict you, you know? So yeah, that's something really, really beautiful about the movie. And yeah, it's just really fun and funny and really colorful, and there's just a very big love of cinema in it.
I really love maximalist cinema in general, and this film is an absolute delight. If I had the energy to and the resources, and if I made films, I would love to make films that are like They're like this.
There's this flip side, like there's the phenomenon of people becoming more conservative about their cultures once they immigrate, but also like there is this thing usually done by later generations where they're able to kind of transform and merge their experiences, diaspora, into something like new and unique, which is really beautiful. And not just in art, like this happens with like food and music and stuff.
No, very true. Happens with a lot of things. I also just think that this is a good movie to watch with the Persian version.
Oh yeah,
very similar like themes and questions, but in a different cultural context, obviously. Like you said, like there are certain experiences of being in an immigrant family that are somewhat universal.
Mm-hmm. There's much to relate to. Okay, next up we have Polarised, directed by Shamim Sharif of I Can't Think Straight fame, which I just I owe this woman my life, but I can't think straight. Like, it's like genuinely like that movie, one could say it stopped me from killing myself. I don't know. Maybe that's dramatic. It possibly was a factor, because it was the first movie about a South Asian lesbian that I saw, like seeing just brown women and lesbians talking about things that really matter to me, that I felt real. But this movie...
This movie.
My God! Just for context. So Shamim Sharif, she's a British Indian lesbian filmmaker, and her wife is Palestinian Christian. And the story of I Can't Think Straight is based on their real life romance.
Yes.
But this movie, Polarised, okay.
This movie is a freaking swirl romance movie between a rich Palestinian American corporate farmer and her poor white country singer farmer lover. This movie,
there's nothing to like about this movie.
Too much of this film is trying to make you either say, like, wow, they're just the same if you think about it, but it's like, you can only do that if you forget how the world actually works. Like, there is a scene where the white girl, the country singer girl, is talking to her love interest, the other main character, and she's like, oh yeah, the bank is going to take our farm because, we can't afford to stay there. And the Palestinian character, like, she goes, oh yeah, like I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh. It isn't funny, but it's just like such a weird equivalence where she says, the Palestinian character says, yeah, a similar thing happened to my family back in Palestine.
When our water was diverted. When our water supply was diverted. And I'm like,
yeah.
Are you
There is another scene in this movie that I think is also quite egregious, but not for those reasons, but because there is a scene where, what was it? Was it tabbouleh cappuccino or something?
Oh my God!
What was it?
Tabbouleh cappuccino. It was something like that. Tabbouleh cappuccino, I want to say, but what is that?
Look, I'm Lebanese, and Lebanese cuisine and Palestinian cuisine, it's very similar, almost the same. And when I heard the words tabbouleh cappuccino, I should have taken that as a sign that the rest of this movie was unserious. Like, I should have taken it as a sign, because that's a salad. What's it doing as a beverage? So back to the weird both sidesism of this movie. The plot line of this movie is that, this girl, her family's farm is being possessed by the bank because they can't afford it. And then the big farm that the Palestinian woman's family own, they're like an agri-tech company. They buy her family's land, and this is after the bank foreclosed on it. But the way that this is, like, framed in the movie is so weird. It's like, oh, how the tables turn, like, I just don't know. Like, honestly, I really wish I could have been in the room when Shamim Sharif showed this movie to her wife. Let me be a fly on the wall. Please.
Sometimes you get recommended a gay movie and it's from like the year 2001 and you watch it and it gets recommended to you because it's like so important to someone that, watched it at a time when that was one of the only gay movies that ever existed.
Yeah.
And you watch it and you're like, oh man, this is shit. But, I understand that it meant something to someone. So if you told me that this movie was made in 2001 and was one of those kinds of movies, I would believe you. But the fact that it is made in 2023 is just, no, that's just baffling to me. I'm disappointed. Like, Shamim Sharif's work, like, it's been so much to me.
Yeah.
So I was supremely disappointed by this. Just, I'm embarrassed, okay?
However,
it's embarrassing.
Thanks to a Letterboxd review of this film, Daya and I have now got one of our favourite phrases.
Yeah.
Which is, I did not feel
their love. And yeah. Yeah, when you watch this movie, yeah, you do not even, like, besides all the backdrop shit like this, like, I do not feel their love.
No.
It's just, yeah. It's a shame.
Yep. It's a shame.
All right, next up we have American Fiction, directed by Cord Jefferson and based on the novel by Percival Everett, which follows an acclaimed black author played by Jeffrey Wright, who stoops to writing stereotyped fiction so that he can have a book that makes him enough money to support his ailing mom. We mentioned this one because Sterling K. Brown plays the main character's brother, and he's a gay man in this.
My note here is, Sterling K. Brown, you are the most beautiful man and great performer. He made a meal out of his small role in a movie that was honestly just, to me, quite messy.
Yeah.
Apart from being the gay brother, he's also a character that struggles with addiction. I really enjoyed his portrayal of grief, and also the humour that his character brought to the movie is really fun. My general thoughts on this movie was that the movie was very hesitant to go beyond the point of view of the protagonist, which sadly I think makes what it's trying to say about the publishing industry and about quote-unquote identity fiction. It kind of makes what it's trying to say about those things a bit unnuanced, in my opinion. There are, like, moments in the movie that pay, like, lip service to, or gesture at, like, wider conversations that could be had, but those moments are, like, very small and kind of blink if you miss them. But yeah, I also just want to say this movie, Tracy Ellis Ross baited me, which I didn't appreciate.
For me, I don't know, the main thing that really bugged me about this movie, that bugs me about a lot of recent Oscar movies that are meant to be set in modern times, is it really frustrates me how they are so unwilling to represent modern technology accurately in these things. It just takes me out of it. Like, it just makes me feel like, you know, these movies are made for, you know, a certain kind of person that doesn't actually understand how these things work, and that certain kind of person is the majority demographic of Oscar voters. And it's it just feels like it's less for the people, you know, when a movie is like this. And, you know, I think movies like Tar and A Star Is Born, they make this mistake as well. Like, they have no idea how to ground themselves in reality because they don't want to engage with the technology properly. The issues that American Fiction deals with, like, it's a very prescient topic, but also, like, it's something that Percival Everett wrote, 20 years ago? And it was just as relevant then as it is now. Like, I think they could have easily just said it around the time that the novel was written, and it would have worked really well, because then we'd look back at it and be like, oh, this is still an issue. If you're unwilling to engage in the tech of today, just show how prescient it still is from where the story's coming from. Okay, next up, another Oscar movie, Poor Things, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, which is a sex comedy about an adult woman reanimated back to life with the brain of an infant, starring Emma Stone. I have very little to say about this movie itself because I don't think it's as deep as people are saying it is. Like, the people that love it and the people that hate it as well, like, it's not as deep as either of you are claiming it to be. I also just think that people that think this movie is actually transgressive and provocative should go watch Dogtooth and then, you know, cry for 2 days. It reminded me a lot of Everything Everywhere All at Once, where it uses really graphic imagery to convey, like, a very safe and corny point, which isn't a bad thing. Like, it's just, you know, live life to the fullest, which is nice, you know. But watching this entire goddamn movie, though, for like a good hour and a half of seeing this woman, you know, find liberation with her sexuality and stuff, I'm just like, okay, is she gonna fuck a woman though? Is she gonna like, it's when it's surely. But she does. She finds a beautiful girlfriend, and the girlfriend comes back in at the end. I really liked that. I was like, oh, they brought everyone in, you know, nice little polycule. It definitely could have been gayer.
Yeah.
I watched this movie at a screening that had a Q&A with Tony McNamara afterwards, and it was really just like him zooming in, projected onto a massive cinema screen, which is a bit disappointing in terms of how it went. But he was just sitting in a hotel room, like, with a massive freaking framed poster of The Great just in the background of where he was, which was a vibe. You know, I just miss The Great so much. That's my main thoughts when I was watching Poor Things. I just miss The Great. All right, next up. Oh, no. Next up, we have Dix the Musical, directed by Larry Charles, which I think is simultaneously the best and worst movie of all time. It's about two aggressively heterosexual men who discover that they are twins who are separated at birth. And it's very gay.
I just have laughed the whole time because I just remembered the sewer boys.
Yeah, the sewer boys. Yeah, this movie it's a prime example of why theatre kids should not have rights, I think. This just... Mary and I, we watched this and we were just laughing the whole time and laughing and cringing the whole time. It was a good time. Megan Thee Stallion is in it, not as much as you would like, but still, she's amazing.
She's amazing.
She looks amazing. Her bars were amazing. Like it was great. It was great. Also, Nathan Lane is in this as one of their dads. Well, as both of their dads. And his costumes are great. It's just like robe central in it. And yeah.
He realizes he's gay.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
In the course of the plot.
Yeah. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen a movie like it, you know?
Also, Bowen Yang?
Oh yeah, as God. Yeah.
To me, this was a masterpiece. Day and I watched this together. I vomited halfway through this movie because I had slight food poisoning. And you know what? That didn't stop me. I came back. You're just in for a ride, man.
Yeah.
You will leave questioning whether theatre kids deserve rights. And
the answer is still always going to be no. Okay, next up we have Anyone But You, which we only mention because it's set at a gay wedding. I didn't know this. I didn't know that it was set at a lesbian wedding. I was watching like all the trailers for this movie being like, oh my God, where in Sydney are they right now? But also like it didn't occur to, I was genuinely like, oh, I wonder who Alexandra Shipp's marrying.
Yeah.
I wonder which dude it is because where is he? Is it meant to be a mystery? It completely went over my head in the promo. This is just a very unrealistic movie where these lesbians don't have any gay friends. It's stupid. And also I just hated the way that Australians were portrayed in this movie. Like, you know, it's not that we deserve much, but
I'm just tired of Americans doing this to us.
Yeah.
It's like,
you got a tax break for filming here. Like, you should
show some like basic decency.
I know.
I don't know.
Ugh.
I'm going to try and spend the same time talking about this movie as the writers spent, like, researching Australia, which is, like, none. But I do want to point out that just something that bothered me, other than the weird, like, using lesbians for the background of a really, really boring interpretation of Much Ado About Nothing, is that there's only one, like, there's an Aboriginal character in this movie. She's played by Charlie Fraser, who's Warramai, which is the land that I'm on. It's the land I live on. And she's the only Aboriginal person in this story, and she's also, like, constantly naked, like, for half the movie, for, like, no reason. Why? Why is this... I mean, I know why, but, like, it's just, I don't know.
It's interesting how much stuff is in this movie for the male gaze, like for a rom-com, you know?
Yeah, it is weird.
I mean, I know people are already tuning, like most guys are tuning into this for Sydney Sweeney's tits, but like, you know, yeah. I was a bit surprised by that.
It's also weird because there is like a joke in the movie about like, oh, Australia, like just like the US, has a complicated relationship to its past or whatever.
Is there?
And I was like... Yeah, why would you have a line like that and then, like, you have an Aboriginal woman in your cast and you make her do all these, like, clearly male-gazy gags? Like, it's just... Yeah. Anyone But You, I did not enjoy. I wanted to so badly, but I was glad I watched it with you, Dee, because it made me laugh.
Yeah. She takes a 6-hour walk... She does a 4-hour walk to Cronulla for all things. Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, not a queer film. Not a queer film. We just wanted to bag on it because it's stupid.
Yeah.
Okay, next up we have Problemista by Julio Torres of Los Spookies fame. So I really love this movie. Julio Torres, he plays an aspiring toy maker from El Salvador, and he needs to find a sponsor so that he can get a work visa so that he can stay in the US. And this is because he loses his interim job that he's been having while waiting to hear back from Hasbro as an archivist at a cryogenics facility for artists. And he's been looking after this one artist who was just always been misunderstood in his time, played by Rizzo. And when he does get fired from the cryolab, He ends up trying to help the artist's wife, played by Tilda Swinton, to put on an exhibit for his paintings so that they can afford to keep him frozen there. And obviously, like, the thing is, he does need to do this well so that Tilda Swinton will agree to sponsor him. And so, like, it's a very heavy premise because, you know, it's an awful situation to be in. But I think this movie manages to... It takes it seriously, but also keeps it light. This movie is very surreal and has a lot of like fantasy visual elements in it that are very, very beautiful as well. The main thing though is I was very surprised. I don't like Tilda Swinton, but so I was really surprised watching her in this movie. She plays the worst. If you work in customer service, she's the worst kind of person imaginable that you could ever have at your business. Like she's like, she will complain about everything. She will send the food back. She will haggle and everything. It's like a nightmare. Like if she came into my work, I would hide. But oddly enough, the way that Julio Torres wrote her, there was just something very, very human about her, and I ended up like really rooting for her. which is really impressive. It's just a really well written script. And I really loved it. And the ending made me sob like so hard. So yeah, I highly recommend it. Next up we have Sahela, directed by Raghuveer Joshi. So this is an Australian film that I really loved. It's about a closeted Indian-Australian man living in Western Sydney who comes out to his wife after they've been married for a couple of years. This is a movie, it shows like his very slow embracement of his sexuality, like at a late stage in his life, but it is more about like the intimacy of his marriage and how important he and his wife are to each other despite that. This is weird to say, like when this movie started, watching him and his wife interact in general, even though like I know he's gay and closeted, like when I was watching that, I'm like, wow, me and who? Because they were just so lovely together. And like this is a movie just about how important this particular connection between these two were, regardless of whether it actually works out. I really love this movie because it's shot in Western Sydney and it uses also quite a lot of different languages and dialects. Like they mostly speak Gujarati, but also Hindu, Urdu, Tamil, and I really like how it shows the diversity of the South Asian communities in Western Sydney. I really appreciated it for that.
Nice.
Also, I think it's crazy. The main actor, he's not Australian, but his accent was so good. I didn't clock it at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal.
I know, it is huge. Just he kicked Dev Patel off the standard.
He uncrowned Dev
Patel as best Aussie accent by a guy that's not Aussie. Yeah. So yes, check out Sahela if you can. It's beautiful. I cried. I sobbed. I laughed. I had a good time. Really, really good time. Okay, next up we have The People's Joker, directed by Vera Drew. Woohoo! Which, oh my god, I was so scared that I would never get to see this movie.
I know.
I missed so many opportunities to watch this movie.
But also I couldn't believe that I was finally sat for it, you know? Like, so cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
It was so cool. So this was a film by Vera Drew that was an unauthorized adaptation, I guess, of the Joker character that Warner Brothers tried to ban. Yeah, I really love. This is a movie that kind of explores this trans woman exploring her gender through, you know, not just the characters of the Joker, but also Harley Quinn, who we love. And I think you definitely need to be like a DC Batman fan to enjoy it, but it is a lot of fun.
Which isn't to say that you need to be like an expert, but you definitely need to have some... Like, you need to have seen some Batman movies to understand a lot of the jokes in this movie. I just really loved what a labor of love this movie felt like. You know, she had this vision. She had the vision, and she just, through whatever means necessary, was gonna realize it. And it's just fun, like, all the sort of practical effects. There's, like, a real kind of video essay production value kind of quality about it. In the sort of affectionate amateurish sense, but it's just so strong. The green screen usage in it is kind of genius. So much of how she establishes like where they are in terms of the DC world is through just green screen and costuming, and it's done like really well considering.
I don't know. I don't think it's done cohesively, but I love like the fact that it is done. It really speaks to like how much effort and how much she wanted to tell the story. That's just really lovely to me. It warms my heart, you know? Like she wanted to make this movie so bad and she did it. And
the pure determination.
The determination.
That oozes out of every part of this movie. It's great. It's so much fun.
Next up, we have The Color Purple, directed by Blitz Bazalue, which is an adaptation of the musical, which is an adaptation of the Alice Walker novel. My main point, just beautiful, beautiful lighting in this movie. I watched this on the plane. I kind of feel bad that, like, you know, people were trying to sleep, but my laptop screen was glowing. But also I don't, because it was a beautiful movie.
Yeah.
I personally I'm not familiar with this musical, only the book, so it's obviously it was a bit jarring in tone for me. But Fantasia and Taraji are were just so good in this movie. I love lesbians. It was great. It was great. Daniel Brooks was also incredible. I'm not really a musical person, but I did really appreciate this as a musical film, because one of the things that annoys me about musicals, I guess, is that they forget that they're musicals halfway through. Looking at you, La La Land. But I think Blitz, he knocks it out of the park. The energy of this movie, it's just so consistently in motion and never forgets that it is. And it's really beautiful. It's just really strong filmmaking.
Nice.
And next up we have Femme, directed by Sam H. Freeman and Ing Chung Ping.
This movie is a thriller about a drag artist played by Nathan Stewart Jarrett, who was attacked by a closeted guy and his mates. He's hate crimed, basically. The closeted guy is played by George McKay. And Nathan Stewart Jarrett's character then hatches a plan to wrought revenge upon his attacker. That's really all I want to say what the movie is about, because I think it's cool if you go in not knowing a lot.
Yeah.
This is one of my honest to God, like, favorite watches of the year. The layers to this film, like the layers of lies. I love when you're watching a scene that on the surface would just look like a normal conversation, but everybody, because of, like, you know, because of the layers, you're just like on the edge of your seat, you know, like. It was really fun watching this in a full cinema with everyone being like, oh my God, you know? And all that's happening on the screen is like these two men like sitting at a table in a restaurant, and you're just like, ah!
It's the most like suspenseful thing in your life you've ever seen in your life.
Most suspenseful thing you'll ever watch in your life. Like the performance of sort of gender in this film and masculinity is so good and presented so well, especially through like clothes and activities. But yeah, weirdly hilarious. I laughed a lot in this movie, which is weird to say given its subject, but it is funny, and it's kind of not afraid to be a bit funny. It's kind of not afraid to sort of point to the absurdity of the situation that the characters are in, which I do love.
Yeah.
I love how unafraid this movie was to be what it is.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing to say, but that's honestly what I love most about it.
No, that's the thing. It kind of tonally, it reminds me of that Look at Me movie that I discussed previously, because this movie keeps you on your toes in that every single scene like changes the game completely. You think you're watching one movie and then it turns into another in a way it's still just very cohesive and very clever. And I want to stress, this movie is not for everyone. This movie does deal with like very traumatic gendered and racialized violence, so like obviously be safe. But that was one of the things that I was thinking about during this movie, like with you saying that it was unafraid, and that there is part of me that was kind of hesitant about it, being like, oh no, what will people that aren't like, you know, in our community think like when they're watching this movie. Like, yeah, I like that this movie is unafraid of and doesn't worry about these things and is genuinely just made for the community, I think, to look at. And I think there's a level of just self-consciousness that we really need to start doing away with, I guess, in order to tell real stories for us, which I really admire this movie for, because it's a movie about empowering yourself after experiencing a trauma. And that is very complicated, and I like that this movie showed just how complicated it was in such a clever way. And if you get it, you get it, you know?
Yeah. I just appreciated that in being sort of unafraid, it feels more relatable. Like you said, it's not being paranoid like, oh, what are people going to think of this? You know, it's really like, no, this is what's happening. Yeah. Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Wish more queer stories were approached this way.
Yeah. I myself, like, I'm still held back whenever I watch a movie, and I like worry. It's my knee-jerk instinct to worry what someone's going to think. This movie is good enough that if you can really let go of that, this movie is just so good. And it was so good.
Yeah.
I can't believe it was so good.
So good.
So that's all, folks. That was all we were able to catch in 2023.
That's all. It's only like lots of things.
Lots of things, but I don't know. There was one movie that I wanted to sneak in before we recorded this, but that's fine. I wanted to watch, Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World, but that's okay, guys. Just let me know if that's good, if you make it this far in the episode.
As I said at the beginning of these episodes, I just think it's really amazing, like, since we've been making this podcast, how much longer these lists get every year. It's one of the things that makes me realize that there is more progress sometimes than I think there is, that we are getting like more stories, and obviously with like more visibility, and we have more things to talk about, and brings with it its own issues. But I think ultimately it's a great thing that we're living in a time where every year there's more LGBT media and LGBT stories to watch and engage with, and that's a gift.
Yeah.
It really is a gift that I can say that, wow, it's really tricky to keep up with it all. I'm sure there are people in the very recent past who couldn't have imagined such a problem.
This reminds me of this thing that Jen Richards said in that Disclosure documentary about trans representation, and how like the solution to trans people being represented poorly in the media is just to have more trans representation. And that applies just to everything.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
More the merrier.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay.
Yep. All right.
Goodbye. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, guys.